Hi there, Steve here, Steve Kaufman, again to talk about languages, as I always do here. And I have a confession to make. I was wrong and Stephen Krashen was right. I have often said that I consider the three keys to language learning success to be the attitude of the learner, the time we spend with the language, and the ability to notice. Now, it's not something that I came up with. This is something that I heard at a conference of the American Association of Teachers of Foreign Languages, and it was the head of the San Diego State University Language Department who said this, and I was very struck by it, and I have repeated it many times. Stephen Krashen would always say to me, noticing, no, we don't deliberately notice. We learn subconsciously through enough compelling, comprehensible, meaningful input. I have come to the conclusion that I was wrong and Stephen Krashen was right. And I think that the ability to notice is something that develops naturally. It develops naturally if we get enough input, if we expose ourselves to the language, if we listen and if we read. So I will now say that the three keys to language learning success are, again, the attitude of the learner, like the language, want to learn, want to be learning this language, confident that we can do it, all of these positive things, that's extremely important. The second thing is the amount of time we spend with the language. In other words, not reading a grammar book in our own language, not necessarily even sitting in a classroom. It's the time we spend listening, reading, speaking, engaged with the language, that time. And the third thing is the availability of good, compelling, comprehensible, meaningful content. And in reflecting on my own language learning, I do best in those languages where I was able to find that content. And this means that we need initially to have beginner content, which again, I don't think should be absolute brain dead beginner content, but content much like our mini stories where you get into a sort of an intermediate level of content, but there is lots of repetition. And of course, because there's so much repetition, the stories can't be that tremendously compelling. But in the initial period, you're kind of motivated to get a sense of the language, to discover how the structure of that language, how it works and so forth. But very soon you have to get into something where you are actually interested in the content. Stephen Krashen claims that this is stories, fiction. He's a big believer in fiction. Personally, I'm more interested in nonfiction. And I've said before that in Chinese, the availability of graded readers on history and geography were very helpful in terms of getting me to the next stage where I could actually read and listen to content, authentic documents from history or books and things of that nature. So finding that content is extremely important. And I think we should do more, language learners, to pool our resources, to help each other, or even to create these resources. So that native speakers in a certain language, maybe there should be more people just recording conversations, and maybe we could have a website where we all put them up there. So that now, for example, in Arabic, so that I could access natural conversations in Arabic, transcribed, or in Farsi. But I think this content thing it doesn't matter. Like I was at the Montreal Long Fest, and there were different presentations on different techniques, chunking, and there's some people who like to use Memrise and Anki, and of course I don't very much, I just stay with Link, but all of that is secondary. The key thing is the availability of meaningful content in the language. So that's the third one. Attitude then, time, and the content. Content is king. And I think that too much effort, that there's all kinds of starter books, grammar explanations, other dictionaries, Ankis, games, language learning games. None of that matters in my opinion. What matters is having suitable content. And graded content, can be a bridge to get to where you can access the authentic content. But I also think natural conversations are a bridge, because typically in conversations, the vocabulary used it's more sort of oriented towards high frequency words. So I would love to see an explosion of conversations, dialogues in different languages, spoken naturally and then transcribed, made available to language learners. I had a comment, I think it was here at YouTube. Someone said, "Why would anyone learn Farsi? It's a difficult language, and the verbs show up in different places in the, depending on whatever and stuff." I don't know. He had a lot of criticism of Farsi. None of that matters. If I can find compelling and interesting content in Farsi, and I'm motivated because there's Farsi speakers here in Vancouver, and because, after all, Iran and Persia, in terms of there's 80-90 million people there, historically it's been a very important country. 2,500 years ago, the Persian Empire was the largest empire in the world, and all of that is kind of stimulating. So things that affect your motivation and the availability of good content is much more important than details of that the language is too complicated and it's silly. And so every language has its complications, and I don't think Farsi is unique in that regard. It doesn't matter. The techniques you use don't really matter, except to the extent that you need to be efficient. So in consuming this compelling and interesting content, you should use techniques that are efficient. Like thumbing through a dictionary, traditional dictionary, is not efficient. No sooner do you close the dictionary than you've forgotten what you looked up. So I don't consider that efficient. But there are things that we can do to make this, all-important consuming of reading and listening more efficient, because the more efficient it is, the greater intensity of the greater the intensity of the learning. But ultimately, though, it's the interest level in that content, the ability to access it, the comprehensibility of it, that's going to make that input activity so powerful. So I just wanted to say that, and I think we have to try better at Link as well. We have a lot of content there, and people can import content, they can import ebooks, but we're going to be out there looking for partners who can provide us with, whether it be free or even to sell across Link. Nothing wrong with paying for something. I would rather pay for content than pay for classroom time, quite frankly, because it's the content that's going to take us to fluency. So, just to summarize, I confess that I was wrong, and once again, Stephen Krashen was right, and he really is the guru when it comes to language learning. You can do other stuff, you can read the grammar, you can do flashcards, you can do all this other stuff, and that's good, and if you're motivated to do it, then do it, and it does provide you with, a different form of exposure to the language, and does sort of maybe stimulate you if you're interested in those kinds of things. But overwhelmingly, it's your attitude, the time you'll spend, and the availability of comprehensible, compelling input. And of course, all three are interrelated and reinforce each other. There you have it. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.